Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The West Memphis 3 case. On May 5, 1993, the weather was perfect in the small town of West Memphis, located in Crittenden County, United States. The 3 8-year-old friends were getting ready at their homes to go out and play. The boys had met at Weaver Elementary School, and what brought them together was the local scout group, where all 3 had reached the rank of novice scouts. First, there was Stevie Edward Branch, born on November 26, 1984, the son of Stephen and Pamela Branch. His parents had divorced when he was young, and later his mother married Terry Hobbs. Years later, the family expanded with the birth of his younger sister. Stevie was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 64 pounds, and had dark blonde hair. He was an honor student with a promising future, but at that moment, he was just a child. That day, he put on a white shirt and blue jeans, left his house on his black and red bicycle. Second was Christopher Byers, born on June 23, 1984, to parents Melissa DeFeer and Rick Moore. His parents divorced when he was just 4 years old, and shortly after, his mother married John Mark Byers, who adopted him, along with his 13-year-old brother, creating a new family. Christopher was the smallest of the group, standing at about 4 feet, weighing around 51 pounds, and had light brown hair. His physique matched his personality. He was very sweet and innocent. He wore blue pants, dark shoes, a white long-sleeve shirt, and headed to his destination. The group was completed with Michael James Moore, born on July 27, 1984, to parents Todd and Dana Moore, and he had an older sister. Michael was the leader and stood out for his strong personality. He was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 77 pounds, and had brown hair. Before leaving, he put on blue pants, a Boy Scout shirt, and a cap from the same organization. He liked wearing the uniform even when he wasn't at scout meetings. He was a real enthusiast. He rode on his green bicycle to meet Christopher and Stevie. The 3 boys headed toward the Robin Hood Hills, where they played all afternoon. Around 6:30 p.m., Christopher's stepfather started calling them to come home, but he only heard the echo of his own voice in response. After half an hour of waiting and growing anxious, Mark Byers decided to go to the police station to report the 3 boys missing. Although the authorities began a search, it had to be limited because it was already very dark, and the trees covered the entire area. Nevertheless, families and neighbors carried out their own search until dawn, but they could not find any trace of the 3 children. At the break of dawn the next day, the police started a more comprehensive investigation, led by the search and rescue personnel of Crittenden County. They searched every corner of the forest, but they could not find even a single clue. Around 1:45 in the afternoon, just when they thought all hope was lost, they reached the Robin Hood Hills, the wooded area where the boys had last been seen. Officer Steve Jones spotted a black shoe floating in a creek, leading to the largest drainage channel in the hills. He alerted his supervisors, and they acted quickly, searching the area downstream of the ditch. There, they encountered the most shocking sight of their lives. The lifeless bodies of the 3 children were at the bottom of a lake, having been tied hand and foot with their own shoelaces. Their right ankles were tied to their right wrists behind their backs, and the same was done with their left legs and arms. The horror did not end there. Both Michael and Steve had bruises all over their bodies. Christopher, on the other hand, had bruises and abrasions on various parts of his body, as well as cuts on his private parts and bite marks. However, this was not of particular attention to the detectives. No one could understand the magnitude of the crime. It had been perpetrated with a cruelty that transcended human limits. At the bottom of the same muddy ditch, wrapped around sticks, they found the children's clothing. Most of the garments were inside out, as if they had been hastily removed. Something that particularly caught the detectives' attention was that the underwear of 2 of the children was nowhere to be found, and one pair of pants had traces of fluid, leading to speculation about a possible motive of sexual assault. However, before drawing any conclusions, they had to wait for the forensic analysis. The case was just beginning. The investigation process was hindered because the officers had removed the bodies from where they were found before the forensic scientists arrived to conduct the pertinent studies. The crime scene was contaminated, as the chief of police was continuously smoking, throwing cigarette butts into the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The hypothesis of sexual abuse was discarded because the studies showed that the wounds were the result of a knife attack, and there were no signs of sexual abuse on the bodies of the minors. Speculation began about the possibility that the children had been attacked somewhere near the woods and then murdered in the ditch. Christopher's autopsy stood out from the rest. He was the only victim with drugs present in his system, specifically Ritalin. While the boy took the medication daily due to his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the dose found in him corresponded to a level higher than that indicated by his therapist. The details emerging from the case were increasingly disturbing, and the townspeople grew more and more anxious, exerting pressure on the police. They were desperate for a quick resolution and a culprit to blame. Suddenly, it seemed as if a light had been shown on a potential suspect, a teenager who seemed to fit the criminal profile. His name was Damien Eccles. He was 18 years old and had a substantial record of minor offenses, such as vandalism and theft. He had dropped out of high school and had been institutionalized due to mental health issues. The police, who had been speculating for some time, saw him as the perfect scapegoat. Eccles was always attracting too much attention with his heavy metal band fandom, his interest in pagan religion, his dark clothing, and his black hair, making the townspeople feel scandalized whenever they saw him. His family, being from a lower social class and having had interactions with social services on several occasions, was also known to the police. On May 7, 1993, Eccles was interrogated for the first time. He denied knowing the 3 murdered children or having anything to do with the case. He even agreed to a polygraph test, which suggested that he was innocent. However, prejudices persisted, and there was no concrete evidence against him. Despite this, the media and the entire town had already deemed him guilty. Public opinion alone was not enough to close the case. The manager of Bojangles, a local restaurant, contacted the police for the second time that week. After seeing the case on television, he believed there might be a connection to an incident that had occurred at his restaurant on May 5th, near where the bodies were discovered. At 8:40 p.m. on the day of the children's disappearance, he had called the West Memphis Police Department to report a strange incident. A man with brown hair had entered the restaurant, covered in blood, with muddy feet, a bruised arm, and appearing disoriented. He had then gone into the women's bathroom. A few minutes later, the man left the restaurant, and the employees discovered blood smeared on the walls of the bathroom. Officer Regina Meek responded to the call, speaking to the manager through a drive-through window. She didn't seem particularly concerned about the information and left without checking the bathroom. After the manager's second call, Detective Bryn Ridge and Sergeant Mike Allen returned to the restaurant, this time with a more proactive approach. They collected scrapings of the blood from the bathroom wall, but did not bother to question the other employees about the incident. The scrapings were never sent to a crime lab for analysis and were later declared lost. The lead was dismissed because the prosecutor argued that it was completely absurd to think that the person who committed the murders and took great care to hide the bodies, clothes, and bikes of the children would enter a public place covered in blood. Moreover, the injuries would have made it very difficult for one person to have killed all 3 boys alone. The police were desperate for someone to bear witness to the crime that they believed Eccles had committed. They interrogated Jesse Miskelly Jr., a 16-year-old with a mental disability, for 12 hours without the presence of his parents or an attorney. After numerous twists and turns, Miskelly implicated himself, Eccles, and Jason Baldwin in the crime, despite not having any connection to Eccles. However, his statement was inconsistent with the forensic evidence, as he described the boys being tied up with an industrial rope, whereas they were actually bound with their own shoelaces. Within a few hours, Miskelly retracted his statement, even providing an alibi that he was in another town watching a wrestling match on the night of the murders. But it was too late. The police had what they needed: 3 perfect suspects, capable of creating 3 distinct knots to subdue the victims, just as the crime scene suggested. The media frenzy that ensued portrayed the 3 suspects as guilty, further fueled by the satanic panic phenomenon sweeping across the United States at the time, where heinous crimes were often associated with devil worship and the resurgence of cults. The West Memphis authorities crafted a strong narrative against the 3 young men, labeling them as outcasts who had committed the murders as part of a satanic ritual. When Eccles' home was searched, a book with a pentagram on the cover was found. The police saw this as sufficient evidence to claim that the 3 teenagers were involved in a black magic cult, shaping the narrative they wanted to impose on the public consciousness. People began to come forward claiming they had seen Eccles near the crime scene. Detectives managed to interview 2 girls aged 12 and 15 who claimed they had heard Damien confess to the murders. An anonymous statement claimed to have seen Eccles covered in mud on the night the children disappeared. However, the real lead was provided by a woman named Vicki Hutchison. She said her son Aaron, who sometimes played with the 3 young victims, had seen strange things in the woods. Nonetheless, her statement was dismissed due to its lack of solidity. Vicki didn't give up and provided a second statement in which she claimed to have seen the teenagers performing a ritual, which later turned into debauchery, on the same night the victims disappeared. She alleged that the teenagers had abused the boys. However, there was no evidence of this on any of the bodies, and her testimony was extremely odd. Vicki committed to gathering more evidence and invited Damien to her home for a conversation. She hid a microphone and recorded every second of their talk. However, the young man didn't say anything that could be used against him. Frustrated by the lack of evidence, the police stated that the tape was inaudible, but didn't prove Eccles' innocence under any circumstances. Both he and Jason were arrested on June 3 of that same year. Jesse Miskelly Jr. was tried separately from the other 2 accused, providing several statements that did not match the facts narrated by the prosecution. The trial was heated, and an expert on false confessions stated that the young man had suffered from police coercion. They had taken advantage of his mental condition to tell him a version of the crime, and he ended up believing it. However, none of this was taken into account when delivering the sentence. On February 5, 1994, Miskelly was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Although he avoided the death penalty, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment plus 40 years. The trial of Eccles and Baldwin was as scandalous as their companions. Evidence used included Stephen King books, black metal band flags, and song lyrics written on the walls of the accused rooms. The verdict was emphatic. The young men were part of a satanic cult and had murdered the children to carry out a ritual. Fibers and a knife found by divers in a lake behind Baldwin's house were also presented as evidence. However, it couldn't be proven that any of these items belonged to the accused youths. It was circumstantial evidence, and they were not given the right to appeal. Much of the evidence that the defense attorneys hoped to present was excluded by the judge. Eccles was sentenced to death by lethal injection for being the mastermind of the crimes, while Baldwin was sentenced to life imprisonment. When asked if there was any reason why the sentence should not be pronounced, Baldwin reaffirmed his innocence. Eccles, completely devastated, shook his head. The execution date was scheduled for May 5, 1994, but nothing was that simple. For the victims' families, the sentence had been handed down too quickly, and there were unresolved issues, which began the most mediatic part of the case, attracting the attention of the most unexpected figures. The young men were already known throughout the country as the West Memphis Three. The case aroused the interest of several prominent figures in the music world, whom Eccles and Baldwin listened to. Among them was Pearl Jam's lead singer, Eddie Vedder, who helped raise money for their legal defense. Natalie Maines, the lead singer of the Dixie Chicks, also joined the cause of the trio. The metal band Corrosion of Conformity included a song inspired by the case called Free the Three in their album Wise Blood. But it wasn't just musicians who were part of the media defense. The young men also received support from Johnny Depp and several film directors. In 2007, with significantly more advanced technology, new DNA tests were conducted. These tests showed that there was no trace of the three accused on the bodies of the children. The bite marks also did not match any of them. Most shockingly, the results suggested the presence of other individuals at the crime scene. A hair found on one of the shoelaces of Michael Moore was consistent with the DNA of Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather. Hobbs had a criminal record and was known in the town for having a long history of mistreatment, including assaulting his wife, allegations of hitting minors, and attacks on neighbors. Another hair found near the crime scene on a tree stump was consistent with the DNA of a friend of Hobbs, named David Jacoby. Both claimed to have been together on the night of the murders. Hobbs emphasized that he believed the guilty parties were already behind bars. However, 3 witnesses presented sworn statements claiming they saw Hobbs with the children on the night they disappeared. The police did not initiate legal actions against him, but the media did. Peter Jackson, the renowned director, began producing a documentary with the goal of reconstructing the events, pointing at Stevie's stepfather as the murderer. New testimonies were collected. Jo Lynn Mackay, Michael Moore's mother, claimed she saw Hobbs washing clothes on the night of the murders, presumably to clean mud off his clothes. Additionally, a cherished pocket knife belonging to Stevie, which he almost always carried with him, was later found among Hobbs' possessions. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, 3 young men claimed that a nephew of Hobbs told them his uncle had been the murderer, but it was a family secret. Opinions among the victims' families began to diverge. The stepfather of Christopher Byers started to suspect Hobbs, even calling him a child murderer. However, Todd Moore believed that the evidence against Hobbs was not convincing. He pointed out that his son spent a lot of time at Stevie's house and could have easily picked up a hair with DNA on his shoelaces on one of those occasions. The tipping point came with the reappearance of Vicky Hutchison, who admitted that she had agreed to collaborate with the police in exchange for a $30,000 reward. She was supposed to provide false information to implicate Eccles. This revelation indicated it was time to redeem the West Memphis Three. In 2010, 17 years after the crime, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered that the DNA evidence must lead to a new trial. The West Memphis Three reached an agreement with the prosecution, adhering to the Alford plea, which allowed them to assert their innocence, while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. On August 19, 2011, they were released on a suspended sentence of 10 years, after having spent 18 years in prison. However, they remain on probation and could be incarcerated again for more than 21 years if they reoffend. The procedure allowed the accused to freely express that they are innocent, even though their official record still lists them as guilty. In interviews given after their release, Baldwin stated that he had been reluctant to plead guilty to crimes he did not commit, but he did so to spare Eccles from the death penalty. Although the families of 2 of the victims came to believe that the trio was innocent, a spectator shouted "murderers" at the 3 as they left the courthouse. it would be very difficult to undo the scandal that the West Memphis police had constructed. In a press conference, the three, now adults, stated that their main concern was clearing their names. In 2013, a new version of the story emerged from Billy Wayne Stewart, a self-confessed drug dealer, and Benny Guy, a convicted felon. The story was not firsthand, but had reached them through Buddy Lucas, a teenager from the town. On May 5, 1993, Buddy had gone out with Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, and his friend John Mark Byers to buy marijuana from Stewart. They then got into Hobbs' truck and drove around the city, smoking and drinking whiskey. They reached a wooded area, and at that moment, Hobbs asked the two teenagers to get out and fight while he and Jacoby watched in a fetishistic act. It was unclear whether this led to any intimate activity. During the course of that afternoon, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch appeared on their bicycles. Upon realizing they were witnessing something they shouldn't, they decided to leave, but it was too late. Hobbs shouted at his companions to stop the boys, while Jacoby hit one of them. That's when the attack occurred, resulting in the mutilation of Christopher's genitals. The other boys had seen too much, so they decided to kill them all. The clothing and bodies of the boys were collected and dragged to the water, and their bicycles were thrown into the swamp. According to Stewart, when he tried to call the West Memphis police investigator to tell him Buddy Lucas' story, he didn't even bother to return the calls. These statements are public knowledge, but the case remains closed. It is unclear if the authorities prefer to leave the case as a collective myth rather than seeking true justice for the victims and their families. And well, that brings us to the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The case of Leah Sousa. On June 7, 1977, the state of Ontario, Canada, witnessed the birth of Leah Sousa. Leah's life began with her strong and determined mother, Laura Sousa, who, despite being a single parent, left no stone unturned in ensuring her daughter's well-being. For a considerable time, their world was just the two of them, journeying through life's highs and lows together. As time unfolded, Laura introduced Leah to her new baby brother, Michael. The identity of their father remains undisclosed to the public. While some believe that a father figure was missing from their lives, the addition of Michael brought a sense of completeness to their family. Living in Cumberland Beach, Ontario, a quaint region about 2 hours away from Toronto, the Sousas had a humble abode with a combined living and kitchen area and a single bedroom. But this didn't deter Leah's spirit. She grew into a radiant young girl with a lively sense of humor and zest for life. Leah's academic achievements and her roles as a doting sister and daughter made her family immensely proud. At the age of 13, the Sousa family decided to visit Laura's sister, taking a rejuvenating 6-week summer break. With the Canadian school year commencing the Tuesday after Labor Day, they were soon back in Cumberland Beach, gearing up for the upcoming academic year. As the 1990 Labor Day weekend approached, Leah was eagerly preparing for her impending high school journey. On the night of September 1, while she rested on the couch, Laura and baby Michael slept peacefully in the bedroom. But that tranquility was shattered when, Between 1:30 and 3 o'clock a.m., an unknown individual forcibly entered their home. Initially, the intruder brutally attacked Laura, using a metal object to inflict severe head injuries. He then turned his attention to Leah, assaulting her inside the house before dragging her to the backyard for further violence. The following morning, a friend of Leah's grew concerned after failing to reach her by phone. She decided to check on her, cycling over to the Sousa residence. The horrific sight she discovered was beyond comprehension. Leah's lifeless body lay in the backyard amidst a scene of devastation. The police were immediately alerted, and upon arrival, they found Laura grievously injured but alive. The silver lining amidst the tragedy was that young Michael remained untouched and unaware of the nightmare that had taken place. Laura was rushed to a Toronto-based hospital, where she spent 3 challenging weeks recuperating under tight security, fearing the perpetrator might return. The extent of her injuries required multiple surgeries, leading to the insertion of metal implants in her skull and cheek. One eye was severely damaged, resulting in lasting issues like impaired vision, dizziness, and diminished hearing. The brutal attack on Leah and her mother, who miraculously survived, profoundly shook both law enforcement and the residents of the rural community. In a place where people once led peaceful lives, leaving doors and windows open and letting children cycle freely without any fear, panic began to permeate the air. Parents became hesitant to let their children play outdoors, preferring to keep them close and in sight. Locking doors, securing windows, and keeping weapons nearby for self-defense became commonplace. In fact, out of sheer fear of a nocturnal assault, many residents started keeping a weapon or tool close to their beds. The palpable fear was evident on the faces of the community members. Investigators tirelessly worked to shed light on the events and identify potential suspects. Even though various samples were collected from the crime scene and inside the home, they couldn't find the assailant's DNA. Neither the weapon used in the crime nor the bloodied clothing the perpetrator wore during the attack was ever found. One key clue emerged: a footprint from a size 9 or 10 Nike tennis shoe made of leather. It was believed that Laura might have seen the attacker, but due to her injuries, she could not recall any events from that night. Investigators theorized that the individual who took Leah's life might have been familiar with the family and their vulnerabilities, noting their secluded living area and the absence of a male figure in the household, a single mother with an infant and a teenage daughter. Furthermore, detectives hypothesized that the attacker knew the region well, possibly being a resident or a frequent visitor, and was aware that the family was alone that particular night. One person of interest identified was Brian Timothy Elson from a nearby town. 4 months after Leah's tragic end, Brian took the life of 17-year-old Sandra Bannister in a place less than 13 kilometers from where the Sousa family lived. While Brian denied any involvement, the police suspected he was in Cumberland Beach on the night of the assault on the Sousa household. However, after questioning, he was released. He was never charged for Leah's murder, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Sandra's case, serving only 6 years in prison. After his release, due to concerns about his potential threat, the courts allowed the police to monitor his movements for 3 years, though this led to no further developments. As the authorities persisted in their investigations, Laura grappled with the gaps in her memory. Eager to recall the events of that fateful night, she tried various methods, including hypnosis and the controversial use of sodium pentothal, commonly known as truth serum. However, these attempts were in vain. Later, she turned to a renowned expert in brain science in Ontario. He attempted to stimulate Laura's damaged right brain hemisphere with magnetic fields to retrieve memories. Sadly, this effort also failed. He explained that human memories don't instantly solidify. Experiences take 20 to 30 minutes to permanently store in our brains. Unfortunately, during Laura's attack, this critical window was lost. He compared it to shutting down a computer without saving, suggesting that the memory might be lost forever, a heartbreaking outcome for Laura. In 2008, Ontario Provincial Police launched a billboard campaign along the highway near the Sousa residence, seeking new leads on Leah's case. This initiative yielded some promising testimonials. That same year, an intriguing tip led to an extensive search for the murder weapon on a wooded property in Cumberland Beach. However, the search came up empty, and Leah's case remained unresolved. In 2010, marking the 20th anniversary of the crime, the news program ran a feature on Leah's case. During their investigation, they found out that Brian's grandmother, a person of significant interest in the case due to her association with another similar attack, lived on the same street as the Sousa at the time of the incident. Brian was reportedly staying with her during that period. When a reporter located Brian at his home and questioned him about the assault leading to Leah's death, he denied any involvement. He claimed he was at a party in another town that night, where 60 witnesses could confirm his alibi. Over the decades since the murder, more than 1,500 people have been interviewed by the police. The quest for answers in Leah's tragic case continues. On one occasion, Laura spoke to the media, expressing her growing concerns that the case might never be solved. However, she maintained hope that one day she would come to know what transpired and why. The grieving mother pleaded with the community not to forget her daughter, even though she couldn't remember the events of that fateful night. The haunting memories continued to torment her, and she wasn't the only one scared by the tragic events of the summer night in 1990. Officers who investigated Leah's case, along with the journalists who covered it, acknowledged the horror that continued to grip them. By 2020, an investigator of the Ontario Provincial Police, the last in a series of investigators who had been on the case since Labor Day 1990, described the brutality as off the charts. He stated that both mother and daughter, deep in sleep, stood no chance against the attacker as they were ambushed and severely beaten. At that point, he revealed that the police believed a pipe or an iron wrench might have been the weapon used by the assailant. Yet they held back further investigative details to avoid jeopardizing the case. Regrettably, as the years since Leah's assault and the severe injuries inflicted on her mother Laura passed, the mystery of that night remained unsolved. More than 2 decades after the incident, the police reiterated that there were individuals who had information about the events and could potentially help solve the case. Despite a reward offer of $50,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator, that crucial piece of evidence never materialized. Still, they encouraged anyone who believed they had even the slightest information to come forward. Jim Van Allen, a criminal profiler with the Ontario Provincial Police, had studied around 850 fatal assaults before retiring in 2010. He dedicated significant years of his career trying to understand the motives behind heinous crimes and how to prevent them. When discussing Leah's case, he stated that while all violent deaths are tragic, some, like Leah's, are unforgettable. To Jim, the crime scene, which looked like a dollhouse in a tidy 60 square meter space without a basement, suggested that the attack was personal and intimate. Given that the family had only recently moved in and only locals knew they were home, he surmised that the aggressor was local and likely acted alone. In Jim's analysis, the intruder, equipped with a metal tool to break a window pane, likely had a sinister plan for the night. The level of violence exhibited indicated the act wasn't just a random outburst, but rather a manifestation of deep-seated sadism. Jim hypothesized that the assailant, already predisposed to violence, might have been at a personal breaking point, possibly under the influence and driven by a lifetime of resentments. He pondered if the man had a recent argument or felt particularly humiliated that day, suggesting past humiliations could have acted as a trigger for his rage. The profiler believed that the attacker might have known Laura and been interested in her. However, as a single mother, she would have been out of his league, like many other women. Jim's analysis suggested that while the intruder was likely known in the community, he wasn't particularly well-liked, leading women to instinctively fear him. From Jim's assessment, while criminals typically flee their localities after committing heinous acts, He felt Leah's assailant might have remained nearby. Perhaps he cleaned his stained clothes and discarded the metallic instrument. The attacker's potential financial constraints and limited resources might have dictated this choice. Though not exceptionally astute, the culprit had the cunning to remain silent. In Jim's professional estimation, this person showed no regret for Leah's untimely death and likely felt indifferent about Laura's fortunate survival. But all these speculations and years of persistent investigation couldn't bring them any closer to the elusive perpetrator. In a twist in 2014, Barry Rule, an ex-officer of the Ontario Provincial Police with 3 decades of service, unveiled a book named A Viable Suspect: Multiple Murders and the Limits of a Police Force in Canada's Most Noted Unsolved Mystery. Barry's narrative raised suspicions about a serial criminal, dubbed Larry Talbot in his writings, connecting him to Leah's demise and other similar incidents in southwest Ontario. A personal encounter with this man named Larry in 1971 was recounted by Barry, wherein Larry trespassed and assaulted his fiancée. This attack was thwarted by Barry, who noticed the intruder's method of entry, breaking a rear window, resembled the approach at the Sousa residence. Larry, known as a traveling salesman in southwest Ontario, had his vehicle inspected, revealing a rape kit. Yet, regardless of Barry's insights into recurring patterns, Larry escaped intense scrutiny and passed away without ever being a legally recognized suspect. Even as Barry's book garnered attention, it didn't decisively resolve the cases hinting at Larry's involvement. Commemorating the 25th year of Leah's tragic end in 2015, Laura echoed sentiments of profound sorrow and exasperation, mourning the stolen potential of Leah's life. Investigators, over the years, left no stone unturned, pursuing leads, deploying multimedia investigations, revisiting evidence, and meticulously studying the comprehensive case files, among the most voluminous in police records. With the belief that someone local held the key to unlocking Leah's murder mystery, the police broadcasted a plea for information, spotlighting a $50,000 reward. Leah's mother lamented that even after years, she couldn't recollect the events of that devastating night. The knowledge that clues about the identity of the assailant responsible for Leah's tragic end were locked away in her memory was tormenting. Driving past the house became a somber task for many in the community. Paul Peden spoke about the profound impact this incident had on their lives. Even though he never knew Leah personally, the chilling details of her fate left him and his peers deeply shaken. Parents became overly cautious, restricting their children's outdoor activities. In a time without the rapid information spread of social media, whispers of fear propagated through the community. A new detective took over the case in 2019, and he has been diligently collaborating with experts from similar past cases. The case file, vast and complex, demanded exhaustive scrutiny to uncover any overlooked evidence. Though he didn't divulge specifics on whether they believed a single individual or multiple were involved, he emphasized the continual re-examination of evidence from 1990, thanks to modern forensic methods. Even after over 30 years, the brutal demise of Leah Sousa remains an unresolved mystery. The collective efforts of the community and law enforcement have yet to bring the perpetrator to justice. This harrowing case serves as a grim reminder to the community about the imperativeness of vigilance and unity. Authorities, meanwhile, are unwavering in their quest for justice. Leah's memory remains etched in the community, continually underscoring the importance of justice and safety for all. That concludes today's narration. Your support is immensely appreciated. If you resonate with this content, please subscribe and share. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. Until next time. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Morgan Chantel Nick. Morgan Chantel Nick was born to Morris and Colleen Nick in Ozark, Arkansas, on September 12, 1988. She was the couple's first child, and later, the family expanded with the birth of 2 more children. Morris was known to be a loving and kind father. Those who knew the couple said they embraced their parental responsibilities, doing everything in their power to make life easier for their children. Though Morris and Colleen initially seemed happy, challenges soon surfaced in their relationship. When Morgan was 6, they decided to separate, which ultimately led to a divorce. The process, however, was amicable, and they never fought over the custody of their children. The children primarily lived with Colleen, a devoted mother who always put her children first. Morgan and Colleen shared a close bond, spending most of their time together. Morgan excelled academically, despite her young age. Having just completed kindergarten, her family could already envision her thriving in elementary school. Personality-wise, Morgan was a shy child with a big heart. She loved apples and was fond of cats, leading her mother to allow her to have one as a pet. Despite her shyness, Morgan was actively involved as a Girl Scout and enjoyed playing with other kids. She dreamt of becoming a circus artist or a doctor when she grew up. On June 9, 1995, Colleen received an invitation from a friend to watch a minor league baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. Thinking Morgan might enjoy watching other kids play, she asked her to accompany her to the game, about 30 minutes away from their home. It was a night game, starting at 9 p.m. Upon arriving, the stands were already packed, but Colleen managed to find a spot for herself and Morgan. However, 6-year-old Morgan soon grew bored and began fidgeting with her shoelaces. Despite being a calm child, usually hesitant to engage with strangers, 2 older kids approached her. They introduced themselves as Jessica and Ty, aged 8 and 10 respectively. There are different accounts of what happened next. In one version, Morgan asked her mother if she could play with Jessica and Ty, but Colleen initially declined. Concerned about the unfamiliar surroundings and the packed venue of almost 300 people, Colleen was hesitant to let Morgan wander off. However, Colleen's friends urged her to let Morgan play, assuring her she was being overprotective and that Morgan would be fine. Eventually, Colleen relented. The kids mentioned wanting to run up a nearby hill to catch fireflies. With the game nearing its end around 10:30 p.m., Colleen allowed Morgan to go, but only for a short while. In another version, when Jessica and Ty invited Morgan to catch fireflies, Morgan's innate shyness made her decline. Yet Colleen's friends thought it would be good for Morgan to interact with other kids. Colleen then persuaded a reluctant Morgan to go with them, even if it meant leaving her mother's side. What's certain is Morgan left the stands with the 2 children. While Colleen tried to keep an eye on them, she got distracted when the baseball game ended and teams came into the stands to greet their families. The next time Colleen looked for the children, she saw Jessica and Ty returning without Morgan. Concerned, she immediately asked them about her daughter's whereabouts. They replied that the girl had disappeared while everyone was emptying sand from their shoes, leaning against Colleen's car. Subsequent investigations revealed that while Jessica and Ty sat at the front of the vehicle shaking out their shoes, Morgan was alone at the back emptying hers. Another significant and worrying detail was that the children insisted they saw a creepy man talking to Morgan before she vanished. Confused and anxious, Colleen immediately raised the alarm, and the adults present at the baseball field helped her search the nearby areas for her missing daughter. However, hours passed in the search without results, and Colleen decided to report the incident to the local police. Those who knew Colleen highlighted her kind nature and how she was always willing to help those in need. Therefore, when she needed support in searching for her child, Many showed their solidarity. Additionally, being a devoted mother who always looked out for her children made the community even more outraged at the kidnapper or kidnappers who took Morgan away from her family. On the day she disappeared, Morgan was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Before going to the baseball game with her mother, she had attended her Girl Scouts activities and was wearing the organization's green shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. Another distinguishing feature of the young girl was that she had 5 silver crowns on her molars, a type of cap used to cover and protect a damaged tooth, which were easily visible. When the police were informed of the disappearance, they immediately began their investigation. Officers and local volunteers organized numerous search mobilizations, while detectives went door to door seeking evidence and witnesses. Since Jessica and Ty claimed to have seen a man speaking with Morgan before her disappearance, the police compiled a detailed description of the suspect, who was said to be between 23 and 38 years old with black hair sprinkled with gray, and he had a mustache and beard. Witnesses also reported seeing a faded red pickup truck nearby with a mismatched white camper shell that seemed too small by a couple of inches. They noticed possible damage to the back right corner of the vehicle. Some claimed the truck had Arkansas license plates, but the plate number wasn't recorded. Additionally, upon reviewing home videos recorded at the baseball field, investigators confirmed the existence of the suspect and the aforementioned red truck. However, unfortunately, the recordings were too grainy to provide a clear image of his face. Once Colleen reported Morgan's disappearance, she called her ex-husband and informed him of the situation. Morris seemed devastated by his daughter's disappearance and expressed willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. Surprisingly, during the initial investigation, the girl's father became a potential suspect as some evidence suggested he acted as a low-level drug dealer. He also reportedly had a criminal history, including assault and property damage charges. From the beginning of the investigation, Colleen was willing to cooperate with law enforcement in every way because her only wish was for her daughter to return safely. However, when investigators initially suspected Morris, her ex-husband, of being involved in Morgan's disappearance, she felt the police were making a grave mistake. She defended him, claiming he would never harm their children. Fortunately, the police soon ruled out Morris as a person of interest and focused their attention on Clifford Joe Pullen, rumored to be his drug supplier. This individual had a criminal record, and in addition to being arrested for marijuana possession, he had also been charged with first-degree rape of a minor in 1995, suggesting he might be capable of kidnapping. Nevertheless, authorities quickly cleared Clifford of any suspicion and stated he was not involved in Morgan's disappearance. Although the police received numerous leads at the time, none led to Morgan, and months, and then years went by. During this period, information from Albert Harvey, a resident of Stuttgart, Arkansas, seemed promising. He claimed he had seen a man fitting the suspect's description with a blonde child trying to enter his truck. Interestingly, Albert was able to identify the suspect from the sketch, and the police used all their resources to scour the area. However, as hours went by without any leads, law enforcement began to doubt his claims. They subjected Albert to 2 polygraph tests, which he failed, and he eventually admitted to lying. The case went cold, and as time passed, the search was no longer for a 6-year-old girl, so the existing photos of Morgan seemed insufficient. To provide a solution, in February 2001, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed photo showing what Morgan might look like at 12 years old. The intention behind such photographs was to widely disseminate an updated image of Morgan. This way, if someone spotted a teenager resembling the image, they could alert authorities to verify if she was the girl abducted in 1995. Leads in the case were dwindling. Although police vowed that they wouldn't stop working the case until they found Morgan, the trail was growing cold. Searches would continue to be held sporadically, and detectives still followed up on every tip they received, but nothing brought them any closer to finding Morgan. The next lead came in January 2002, when a tip led investigators to search a property in Logan County, Arkansas. A witness claimed that Morgan was buried there. This testimony was so detailed and specific that the police acted on it. However, despite using search dogs and scouring the area thoroughly, nothing was found. On August 14, 2005, ABC's Extreme Makeover, Home Edition, and John Walsh, co-founder of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, addressed the topic of missing children, highlighting Morgan's abduction. Colin and Morgan's siblings received a new home after their family home was damaged by a water heater explosion. In November 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Sparrow, Oklahoma, after receiving a tip from a confidential informant. Sparrow was about 25 miles from Alma, and the property they searched had once belonged to a convicted child molester who was currently in jail. Although investigators had nothing linking the man to Morgan's disappearance, they searched through the home looking for possible DNA evidence that might indicate Morgan had been there. Unfortunately, they didn't uncover anything related to the case. In August 2012, two convicts, identified as Tonya Smith and James Monhart, were accused of trying to buy some of Morgan's personal documents, including her social security number and birth certificate. While they were found guilty of document forgery, investigations determined they weren't involved in Morgan's disappearance. On December 18, 2017, police conducted another search on a property in Sparrow. Some reports said it was for an unrelated investigation, while others believed it was connected to Morgan's case. Notably, the search dogs signaled to a well on the property, which then became the focus of the search. After an intense 24-hour search, investigators left the property without finding any evidence. In November 2021, detectives identified Billy Jack Links as a potential suspect in Morgan Nick's abduction. An Arkansas resident, Billy was a registered sex offender who had been in and out of prison since 1992. Reports suggest he had a typical upbringing, with no apparent signs of deviance. He served in the U.S. Army during World War and later worked for an airline in Dallas before returning to Arkansas. Despite seemingly staying out of trouble, he was arrested and charged with sexual offenses in 1992. 2 months after Morgan's 1995 disappearance, Billy attempted to kidnap an 11-year-old girl only 8 miles from where Morgan vanished. Witnesses reported he drove a red pickup truck, aligning with descriptions from Morgan's case. A week after Billy's arrest, investigators searched his truck, finding hair, fibers, a mesh sheet, rope, a tarp, insulation tape, and blood on one of the seats. The samples were stored for future analysis, but it's unclear if they were tested then. Shortly after his arrest, Arkansas State Police and the FBI tried to question him about Morgan's case, but he invoked his right to an attorney and refused to talk. Regarding the 11-year-old he tried to kidnap, Billy proclaimed his innocence, but he was convicted of sexual solicitation and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 1995. Billy remained behind bars until his sudden illness and death on August 5, 2000. In 2021, a news channel aired a documentary titled "Still Missing Morgan." Arkansas police mentioned they were still seeking information about the red truck with an attached white cabin. The documentary led to over 200 new tips, but none have resolved the case. The revelation about Billy Jack Links was the last major update, but Morgan's disappearance remains an active investigation, with the police continuously receiving tips. Meanwhile, Colleen pleads with law enforcement to follow every lead, refusing to rest until his daughter is found, hoping for her safe return. This case has profoundly impacted Arkansas and even influenced the naming of the Amber Alert. The Amber Alert system began in 1996 after the disappearance of Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas. Amber is an acronym for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, managed under the Department of Justice. The Morgan Nick Amber Alert is Arkansas's name for the program designed to alert the public when a child goes missing. This program is a joint effort between local law enforcement, media outlets, and civic groups to raise awareness about potential abductions, thereby increasing the chances of locating the missing child. Activating the Morgan Nick Alert involves the participation of all Arkansas law enforcement agencies, along with more than 250 local radio stations, TV networks, and other media outlets. This information is quickly disseminated to all parties, enabling them to broadcast details about a possible abduction widely. As of 2023, the case remains unsolved. Since Morgan's disappearance in 1995, her father, Morris, has opted for privacy, preferring not to discuss his daughter's case publicly. In contrast, Morgan's mother, Colleen, is vocal about her ongoing efforts to bring Morgan home. Colleen lives in Alma, Arkansas, where she runs the Morgan Nick Foundation, assisting families dealing with abductions or missing persons. Beyond advocating for these families, Colleen spreads awareness about daily dangers faced by children and offers detailed resources to help parents and teachers understand online safety basics and parental control apps. Despite extensive investigations that have yielded thousands of leads, there is still no concrete information on Morgan's whereabouts. The FBI and local communities have offered a reward of $60,000 for information leading to the recovery of Morgan Nick and the identification, arrest, and conviction of those responsible for her kidnapping. Thank you for supporting my work. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. See you next time on Unreal True Crime. Goodbye.